Hello, guys. This is Mark Saint for Brazil and Subtitled, your channel, as you know, to get to know all you ever wanted to know about Brazil, but inside the English language. Here, you don't require subtitles. You can watch all the videos in plain American English from a Brazilian local, me. And if you follow the channel, you have probably seen a couple of interviews with foreigners. If you guys don't remember, the first interview was with Kevin because I happened to made a post in one of the groups on Facebook requesting foreigners who have some connections with Brazil to come forward and share with us and with the viewers and with the foreigners who follow the channel the experience of going to Brazil, of being in love with Brazil. Even those who don't live here but have been here before are telling us everything they have to say about the country. I have here the pleasure to interview Keila. Is that correct? Your name is?
Yeah,
Okay, Keila.
Kayla.
Really sounds Brazilian when I say
I
Keila.
know. I
So I have
know.
the opportunity to interview Kayla here by my side. She's from Vancouver, Canada. Is that
Correct.
true? Have I
It's a
got it?
little it's a little bit more complicated than that, but yeah.
Maybe a smaller city close to Vancouver, something like this?
I grew up in Vancouver. Yeah, I grew up in Vancouver, Canada.
So you have grown up in one of the best cities to live in the world and one
That's
of the
true.
best countries to live in the world. How proud are you?
I'm pretty proud. Yeah,
Proud of
absolutely
you. I have
feel blessed.
That's very good. So as I usually do, and it's part of any interview, can you please start talking to us about who you are,
Sure.
jobs and everything?
Yeah, so like I said, it's a little bit more complicated. So my parents actually are from Nicaragua, which
Okay.
is Central America.
Your last name
Um,
is Ramirez, right?
Ramirez, yeah, Ramirez. They left in the late 70s because of civil war, migrated up to Mexico, which is where I was actually born. So I'm Mexican, and lived in Mexico for 3 years. And then we moved up to Vancouver, Canada.
Mhm.
And then the last 5 years I lived in Canada was in Toronto. So Vancouver and Toronto are kind of my hometowns, if you would say, or where I feel more comfortable. But I grew up in a very Latino environment, very Spanish speaking, very Canadian, but also Spanish. I
That
speak
is Toronto.
Spanish fluently in Vancouver and Toronto as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
But this Latino neighborhood that you grew up in was in Vancouver or Toronto?
Yeah, it's not so much a neighborhood. It was more, my dad's a pastor. So we had a very large Spanish congregation. So
Mhm.
there was people from all over Latin America. And it was very much part of their growing up experience that was, very, very Latina,
Very
right?
nice. Very nice.
So it was a Latina first and then kind of Canadian second.
Allow me to cut you off from time to time because I'm really into details. I like to
Sure,
ask
yeah.
details if you don't mind. Of course, I'll never ask the number of your passport or anything like that, but I'm gonna go into details. For example, I want to ask you, did you grow up speaking Spanish because of the parents? Was it
Yeah, so I actually
like
grew up.
childhood?
Yeah, so I actually had a trilingual childhood.
Wow.
So I spoke Spanish as my first language.
Hmm.
And when we moved to Vancouver, I was 3 years old. And Canada, being multicultural and amazing country that it is,
Sure.
they offer French as a French immersion program free of charge for, in basically all of the schools.
Oh my
And
God.
so by the time I was 5, I was in a French immersion school. So I was learning English, but also French sort of at the same time.
I envy you.
I was very confused.
When
I
I
was
was
very
22,
confused little child.
I can believe that. When I was 22, I started studying French and I stopped after 6 months. And I
It's
have
a,
to say, I really regret that decision because nowadays I've been trying to learn by myself and it's hard, you know?
yeah, but well, when you're a child, it's so much easier, right? So I was a confused child for about a year or two, and then things kind of evened out. So I grew up school-wise, it was French and English, but then home and most of my friends and community was Spanish.
Okay. And where did you
Yeah,
get
and
to
it,
practice French? Did you go
sorry,
where did you get to practice French?
at
Did you get
school.
to go to like Montreal or something?
No, no, not even. Canada is bilingual country.
Hmm.
So, there's French festivals in Vancouver. As part of the curriculum as well, they would take us to all like the French, film festivals and literary festivals and excursions. There's a big Francophone community. And I did French 100% from age 5 until about age 13.
Okay.
And then they split it up. So then it's more English. So it's like half and half.
Okay, first of all, I need to apologize for my ignorance, but as far as I know, the English speaking side of Canada does not have French as like a priority to learn, right? It's more
This
like
is
French people, like I follow like UFC, the fights and everything.
mhm.
There's a guy called GSP, like George St. Pierre.
Sure.
Yeah,
I,
sorry. But a boyish thing, I know, I know. But you know, Georges St. Pierre is like a star, like Anderson Silva for us in Brazil, and he's from Montreal, I guess, Quebec.
yeah,
He's in.
yeah. Quebec. Yeah. So Quebec is the province,
Uh-huh.
and they're the ones that French is. I mean, they're the French province, right?
Okay.
Montreal, Quebec is kind of the epicenter of that.
Mm.
But nationally, so across all of Canada, French is the official second language.
Okay.
And so, for example, for any government job or any civil servant job, you have to have a fluency in French.
Very nice.
For all, like in high school, you're taught French.
Mhm.
In order to graduate university across Canada, you have to have a second language.
Wow.
Usually, it's French,
So everybody
right? So
speaks
even if
French,
it's not used,
even in the English side.
to varying degrees, right? So if you're not in the French immersion program, which is full 100% French, which is what I did, the
Mhm.
only requirement is you take a class in high school, so 4 or 5 years of a French class, and
Mhm.
then maybe in university. So people are outside of Quebec.
Okay.
They're passable, but you're right. Mostly the French is in Quebec and that province.
Mhm.
But it's still an official second language, so all of our advertisements are in both languages, all of our like instructions and things, our second language are in 2 languages. At federal jobs or provincial jobs are all, you
Yeah.
require French.
So ton français c'est très bon.
Mon français c'est très bon, oui.
It's the only thing I know how to say.
Blé de la blé de blue blah blé. See?
You're not. You're not. You're. Again, you're not speaking French.
I'm kidding. Okay, what do you do for a living?
What I do for a living.
Yeah.
So currently, it's also kind of complicated. So
No,
I work in.
sorry to cut you off. I just want to say something for the viewers. Her story is really interesting. First of all, she lives, if you ask her, where is your house? She's going to say planet Earth.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work in major sporting events. So Olympics, Pan Am Sports, FIFA, just major sporting events. That's what I do. Within that, I do strategic operational planning. I do program management, and focused on readiness, operational readiness, and things like that. So they're very like game specific things.
And you
But
get
overall,
clearance.
sorry?
And you get free clearance for all the games and all the access and all the buildings.
I do. So my
Oh my God,
accreditation
my
is like all, but I don't get to go to any of them though, because I'm always in the, what we call the MOC, the main operations center, which is like the control center where everything goes wrong. That's where it
I would
goes.
be in the backstage, right?
Yeah.
Controlling.
Yeah, no. So for example, the Rio Olympics, I went to one event, which was the Usain Bolt 100 meters.
Mhm.
I slept through most of the event because I was so tired. I'd been working like 16, 18 hours a day, so I was exhausted. And that's it, right? So it's very behind the scenes presence.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And athletics doesn't have the glamour of the TV, right?
No, it's so boring. Oh
commercials,
my
'cause
God.
you have breaks and breaks and breaks and breaks, and you're, oh my God, I don't know if
And
I go
yes,
buy
and there's
popcorn and,
so many things going on. That's the other thing as well. So there's like a javelin throw over here, and then over there, there's people doing, the vaulting thing. And
yeah.
I was just so tired, and I'm like, I'm just wake me up when Hussein comes on.
And you applied for this job when you lived in Canada. That's where you got the
So
job from.
yeah, so it's kind of a journey, So to
Sure.
get into the games world, it's an interesting journey. So my first experience with games was in the Vancouver Olympics in 2010. And that was sort of like my introduction in games.
Mhm.
That's how I got started. Then I worked for the Pan Am Games in Toronto. So, moved to Toronto and then got involved with the Pan Am Games. And it was during the Pan American Games that I actually got an email from the Rio organizing committee for this position in Rio. So they were looking for specialists or, people with history or experience in this very particular area, which was C3 and operational readiness. And so that's how I got to Rio. So
Yeah, that's
finishing
exactly how everything started with Brazil, the connection, right?
the connections. Yeah. Who do you know here? Blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
And so finishing the games in Toronto in
Mhm.
2015, 2 weeks later, I was starting in Brazil, in Rio.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
So interesting. But World Cups is not part of it, is it? You said FIFA as well.
No. Yeah. So no, it's not part of it. But
Mhm.
once you're sort of in the major sporting world, like the connections, it's a small industry.
Ah,
So everybody kind of knows everybody.
mhm.
So for example, we just finished the Pan American Games in Lima, 2019.
Okay.
And at the same time, there was the CONMEBOL Libertadores, Copa Libertadores final. And they had to
You know that
change
very well.
last minute. Yeah, exactly. And so they had to change last minute. They were supposed to be hosting it in another city, in another country.
Okay.
And last minute, they moved it to
Yeah, I
Lima.
remember why.
Right. So it was one of those, because we know everybody. So the people that were organizing that event, we had worked together in the Olympics and in a couple of other events. So it was one of those, hey, we need some help. We know you're in Lima. Can you help us out? So
Oh.
it's very connection based. It's very
And your
connection
job,
based.
like the last 5 minute changes happen a lot for you.
No,
Like I have
that
to the finals of the
no, that is not usual. That is absolutely not usual, and it is a testament, definitely, to the team that put it together, that they were able to last minute move everything and deliver the event.
And you were part of it.
Yeah, so we came in right at the end, right? So we were based in Lima. Me and my team were in Lima.
Okay.
So, we helped them with, getting the providers that they needed, the service providers, organizing like their volunteers and their, a couple, wherever they had gaps, we're like, yeah, we'll support, we'll help you with that. Because, we had the connections as well after having just delivered the Pan Am Games in Lima. But, to put on an event like an Olympics, it's a minimum 4-year planning cycle, right? It's something just so huge that people don't understand how much goes into planning an event like that.
And you gotta, I don't know if it's part of your responsibility or anybody, but you gotta keep visiting the country, right? The host country from time to time to see if the projects are being made. And we had a problem about that with Brazil because organization here is our best,
Yes. Yeah. Listen, I've now been, a consultant in these games now, for the last 5 years or so.
Okay.
And I have to tell you, without actually being in country, without actually living there and being there full time and understanding the context, the political context, the governance context, just like even just the small little, hiring processes, right? It's very difficult to plan an event and deliver it because every event is different because of the country that it's in, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
So, they'll bring in these experts and these consultants because of the games experience. But I think, the best ones or the ones who have the most success are the ones who take the time to understand the context and understand, you know, the history and the background and, you know, the culture, in order to be able to apply the experience that they have to that event. Otherwise, you don't get anywhere, you know, and it's a difficult adjustment.
Very nice. Very nice and very interesting. You know, I told you this because I am always following the news about my country. I live in Brazil. I live in São Paulo, of course. And I remember how we left everything for the last minute. Because this is part of who we are. I can say that because I'm a Brazilian. So we like, I think, is the excitement of, oh my God, we're going to be late. We're not going to be able to deliver. So don't worry, let's have another beer. And then...
Oh my God. So, you know, one of the
I know
key
you have
phrases is like,
a lot of things.
oh my God. Tudo vai dar certo. Deus é brasileiro. Deus é brasileiro, Keila. Tudo vai dar certo.
Pessoal,
That means for our English friends.
brasileiros que vocês estão assistindo, olha que bonito o português dela. O português dela é muito bom. Ela mesma disse para mim pelas ligações que é carioca da Gema. But I have some foreigners watching this interview as well, so I need to say that in English.
Yeah.
I just told my Brazilian friends and viewers that her Portuguese is excellent. She calls herself, how do I say carioca da Gema in English?
It's like because Gema is literally like the bone marrow, no? So it's like a hardcore carioca, like.
Good. So yeah, she calls herself a hardcore carioca. So her Portuguese really sounds like one from a carioca. So it's amazing.
Thank you, obrigada. But the phrase that I was saying was, you know, you were talking about how Brazilians love to leave things to the last minute.
Yeah.
And one of the famous phrases that everybody in the organizing committee would say when I was really worried about delivering, like, oh, Keila, don't worry. God's Brazilian. Everything's going to be fine. God's Brazilian. Don't worry. I was so stressed out. I was so stressed all the time because, you know, talking about culture, that is not Canadian culture at all, right? At all.
What is culture at all? It's Brazilian. It's really Brazilian. We're going to get down to this later on during the interview, but I don't want to advance too much. I want to really know about the connection. So, okay, you received this invitation or offer for you to work in the Olympics of 2016 here in Rio de Janeiro. And then had you studied Portuguese prior to that?
Nothing.
How do you
Zero.
guys learn? No, seriously, let's stop everything here. How do you guys learn my language so easily? Because I have a lot of Brazilians who have trouble speaking English. How do you learn Portuguese so easily?
Okay, three things. Number one, I think that me speaking Spanish and French really helped.
Yeah. Okay.
Because right away, I was able to understand it very well. And almost right away, I was able to read it. You know, the brain's a weird thing.
You saw some
really weird. So I, you know,
of course, maybe vocabulary, pronunciation.
Of course.
In general, the
spelling
core
things
was the same. Right?
Yeah. So I could actually read it before I could really understand it. But then I started to really understand it. And then the most difficult part was actually speaking, right? But I think the French. Number two, I had to. I absolutely had to. It wasn't a matter of, oh, it'd be nice to learn Portuguese. It was more, I can't do my job and I can't do life without speaking Portuguese. So it was my first 4 months, I would say, were really intense. As in, you know, I'd come home with headaches every single day, like, you know, splitting headaches. So I was so concentrated. In every meeting, I was just 100% trying to understand what was going on.
Like people didn't speak English. That was your problem, Keila.
Yeah. So when I did my interview with the organizing committee, you know, I said, you know, what's the operating language? I don't speak Portuguese. I just want to put that out there. I don't speak Portuguese. They're like, no. Everybody speaks English. So I'm like, okay, great. So, you know, I showed up to my first day and I think the higher positions did speak English, right? They didn't like to, but they did. But everybody below that was actually doing the work, that was in the planning sessions, that I needed to get information from in order for me to do my reports and my things, they did not speak English. And so it was when I wasn't expecting to have to like give my presentations in Portuguese. And a lot of the English speaking expats, they call them, or the consultants or whatnot, that were not even consultants because we all worked for the organizing committee, but a lot of the expats that didn't speak English, they struggled. That didn't speak Portuguese, they struggled a lot. So they were not able to advance as quickly as they needed to. There was a lot of resistance from the team, right? So we'd go to meetings and, the team was just completely uninterested or wasn't really paying attention, and so I very quickly saw that if I didn't learn Portuguese, I wasn't going to be effective, right? And also my local team, they were amazing. They were like, okay, we're going to give you 4 months, but after the 4 months, we're only speaking to you in Portuguese. And I was like, okay, cool. So the first 4 months, they would speak to me in English, they would explain things. But then after that 4-month mark, it was like, nope, just Portuguese. So I was literally forced to learn. Yeah. Wow. And then after that, I don't know how to explain it. It was literally like a switch went off in my brain one day. And then all of a sudden, I was speaking Portuguese.
You are intelligent.
I've got a knack for languages. And I mean, come on, I had some pretty epic disasters, like epic disasters. I
don't know. Look, I don't know if I told you this. We don't literally know each other very well. Actually, we're getting to know each other in front of the camera, which is really, we just have the group in common and now some friends in common. We are friends now. I want to consider that. But my profession in Brazil is I'm an English teacher.
Okay.
I've been doing this for 20 years now, and I have other 10 years of experience with the language because I started when I was 10 years old. Now I'm going to be 2 months. It's 30 years of experience with the language. And I have to say something to you and you know that. I mean, I have to say something for the people watching. When you speak a second language, the third, the fourth, the fifth, they become really easy. Because it's kind of like you know the format, you know what you have to learn maybe. So things just come naturally. I think you just have to want it. And of course, if you're smart, like in your case, it happens a lot. But you were in Brazil, you were forced to speak Portuguese, and you had this background of speaking
which helped.
So
exactly.
It helped a lot, right?
It helped a lot.
Let me stop you for a second and ask you a few questions. Okay, before the invitation to come to the Olympics, did you think of Brazil? Did Brazil cross your head in any moment, cross your mind?
No.
No.
And that's
did
a really good
we
question.
Existed?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. That's actually a really good question because I think that's what set the expectations up, right? All I knew of Brazil was, geography, was, it's supposed to be this beautiful beach, carnival, the very touristy sort of vision of Brazil. That's it. And I had already traveled a lot in South America and Central America prior to moving there.
But never.
But no, never Brazil. Never Brazil. And
what countries did you visit here down the line of equator?
Prior to moving to Brazil?
Exactly. Prior getting to learning that for the next months or years, you would have more contact with the country. Before this moment.
Oh, so you're asking me what countries would I have liked to travel before moving to Brazil? Or
no, let me express myself better then. What I mean is, you received an invitation to work in the Olympics, right? What countries had you visited down the equator before? Because Brazil never. What countries had you visited here?
Yeah, so I visited in South America. I visited Colombia and Chile, right? And then in Central America was basically all of Central America, but that's mostly because my family's from Nicaragua.
Okay.
So, I did a little backpacking trip around Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala. No, we didn't go to Honduras, but that's it. And I lived in Cuba for a year.
Oh, nice.
So yeah,
But
and I lived in
Brazil
Cuba for a
was
year.
never an option when you
Never, no.
traveling.
And
What about the media?
for no reason.
Oh, no, I get it. It's pretty
Mm.
normal. Like me, I don't think of going to, let's say, maybe Italy.
Mm-hmm.
Never crossed my mind of going to Italy. Doesn't mean I have anything against the guys, you know.
Mm-hmm.
The world is really big. So, and again, I have to say, no judging. All right, never at all. I
Never, no.
because Dave is an American from the core.
Yeah.
Tennessee, you know. So I say, hey, no judging at all. I just want to hear you. So, Keila, let me ask you: when you watched the news or read about the world, did you ever come across news about Brazil when you were in Canada?
Very little.
Very little.
Very little. It was in the context of celebrating the culture. So music. So I did know a lot of, not a lot, but I knew about Brazilian music, samba. I knew about, for
Bossa nova,
example, like
maybe?
the traditional bossa nova, the traditional foods. In Toronto and Vancouver, there's quite a big Brazilian population.
Okay.
And so it was always like they would have Brazil Day, right? And so it was like bossa nova
Like in
music
New York,
playing.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it was all very, like I said, very like the normal touristy things that you would assume. So
Okay.
so they'd have a feijoada, coxinhas. I love coxinhas. So I didn't know coxinhas before going to Brazil, but it was all very music, food, carnival, party sort of environment, right?
So the happiness and this friendly environment
Yes,
the Brazilians share with other
yes.
people was not like it was not new for you. You knew
No,
you knew it.
that was all I knew. Exactly. That was all I knew.
Okay.
And like I said, Toronto and Vancouver have very large Brazilian populations. So, and they seem to be very close knit, and so, yeah, so prior to going there, I didn't have any other expectation, any other idea or point of reference.
Okay, now we're gonna get down to a complicated question. What was your experience like in Rio? We already knew the established scenario that you had, having to learn a language that you never expected to learn, which is Portuguese, which is not that easy for many foreigners. You have a background of speaking Latin languages, so it might have helped a little bit more. Tell me about your experiences. I want to hear from you, Keila, about ups and downs when it comes to.
Ups and downs.
Let's start with the bad things first, or better, the good things.
Okay. My experience was it was complicated. First of all, I wasn't there for pleasure, right? I wasn't there as a tourist. I was there for work, and I was living there. So I think that the biggest adjustment was the culture shock professionally.
Okay.
That was a big challenge for me. Even though I had grown up in a Latino or Spanish environment my whole life, my whole working experience was in very, orderly Canadian, Western sort of models and rhythms and things like that. So I was very unused to the more Brazilian, easygoing kind of no pressure, very relaxed work environment, especially when you have a deadline of the Olympics, and I arrived stressed out with the tight timelines that we had. So that was a big challenge. It was a big challenge for me to understand the working culture and to work within it. So I had an idea of how to do things, and then there was the Brazilian way of doing things. And so marrying those two in order to be able to deliver, huge challenge. It was very, very difficult. Even just to the way that you write emails, right? So in Canada, for example, you say, Bob, can you please send me blah, 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 blah documents by 3 p.m. Cheers, right? Oh my God, if you send an email like that in Brazil, like you're done. Like No one's going to speak to you. They're going to think you're super rude. How dare you? You know, you have to start, beijinhos, tudo bem, a família, cadê o cachorrinho, you know, and then go into like, oh, if you have time, maybe you send me this, blah, 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 beijos, you know, kisses. And for me, that was like, that's so weird. Same with meetings. Like I'm used to going to meetings where you have an agenda and it's, you start at 10 a.m., right? And then you just bam, 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 half an hour, you're done. But in Brazil, not like that at all, right? It's people are arriving 10, 15 minutes late with their little coffee. Then, you know, everybody talks about their weekend and how is a churrasco and blah, blah, blah. And so, you know, half-hour meetings would turn into 2-hour meetings, right? So things like that just made it very, very difficult for me to work and to adapt. Number one. Number two, it's very difficult as well just to kind of establish yourself in Rio. If you don't speak the language, there's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of bureaucracy. And even with the help, so in the organizing committee, we had a dedicated person who was like our support. And they would do things like help us get an apartment or help us get a bank account. But those things were
It's the
only
person
made
who knew all the ways
all the ways, exactly.
to achieve your goals here.
Exactly. And even with their help, it was so difficult. It was, you know, it was a nightmare. Like banking. Oh my God, banking. Why is it so difficult to do banking? And so I would get frustrated often.
Guys,
with those day-to-day things.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to say, when I talked to Keila on the phone prior to the interview, we discussed about a few things to set the tone of the interview, of course. She was a little preoccupied with what she could say about the country. And my job was to assure her that she would have free space to open her heart and tell exactly what she thought of her experience in Brazil. Because again, she came here to work, but of course she also experienced a few things that normally people who live here experience, right, Keila?
Exactly.
If I'm mistaken.
Yeah.
So guys, I just want to make it clear that everything she says is very welcome on the channel. Because the first thing, if you guys follow my videos, you will see whenever I show a place, I'm going around São Paulo, I say, hey, be careful with this street, be careful with this, be careful with that, because it's my responsibility to show you the reality. Mm-hmm. Nobody's trying to hide anything here. Brazil is everything you guys know. There are a lot of positive sides, mm-hmm. but also negative sides. Mm-hmm. I think the beauty of the thing is to be able to love it. Or yes. Her, as Kevin says, love her the way she is. Yeah. I never thought of talking about my country as a she, but you know, so it's very interesting. And I'm sorry, Keila, I want to ask you more details.
No, of course. And you know, to that point, every country has bad and good. Every country has problems, has its issues. And I think in order for us to have like an honest, in-depth, you know, nuanced conversation about Brazil is important, right?
How do you solve the problem? By talking about it, no? You can't hide.
Exactly. So day-to-day, like just day-to-day life.
Sorry, I want to talk about banks because I have recently opened 2 accounts for myself, so I want to know how different it is for you to open a bank in Vancouver, Canada. Here, let me just place the scenario. Here, I had to take my documents. We call RG here, which is like an ID number card, right? And then I took my income report for me to prove I have the money, especially because I'm a self-employed person. Mm-hmm. I had to prove where I lived, so I had a electricity bill or something like that. What else? Basically 3 or 4 different bills. And then they check your information, of course, and they open the account. What happens in Canada that is so different from what you are accustomed to?
So the in Canada, you can open a bank account online.
That's the wrong number.
Like it's pretty easy. And come similar as you, like your proof of residence and an electricity bill, your ID, and that's it. I don't need proof of income or anything. It's just here's where I live, here's proof that I live there, and here's my ID. That's it. What frustrated me with my experience in Rio was that there was very inconsistent information of what I needed to bring. And so, I'd call beforehand and they say, you don't need your work contract. That's fine. And then there was only like one bank in Centro Rio that I could go to. I couldn't go to any other one, and had very limited hours. And then you would wait for, 45 minutes in 3 different lines. And then you get to the front and then they said, oh no, but you need your work contract. Like, so it took me like 3 different tries in order to, and it's just that sort of lack of organization and consistency in the information.
Não acho que quem ganhar ou quem perder, nem quem ganhar nem perder, vai ganhar ou perder. Vai todo mundo perder. Está pedida há muito mais tempo. E porque hoje, porque era o dia que eu podia e ele podia. Eu podia, quase que eu não podia, tá? Porque eu vinha para cá.
O Kiko disse que a sua mãe disse para dizer ao senhor que o Kiko disse que a sua mãe disse para eu dizer que o Kiko me disse que me disseram para o Kiko disse que não sei o que era, é o negócio.
The language barrier. So
It's
I
a
think my
dumb
second
bureaucracy,
time,
right, Keila?
it's a bureaucracy.
Because
It's a
it makes you
bureaucracy.
waste time, and if you're wasting time at the end of the day, you're wasting money, and you're not
Exactly.
contributing for the country to grow as a nation, right?
Exactly. And it was that bureaucracy that really wore me down with just day-to-day things. Getting an apartment, had it not been for the fact that the organizing committee was like my co-signer, almost impossible to rent an apartment. If it's not like Airbnb or like one of those rentals, but like to sign a lease in my name, I had to have the organizing committee write me like a guarantee letter. And basically they say, we'll pay for her if something happens, right? Very, very difficult, very, very difficult.
Yeah.
But again, those are day-to-day things,
Did you
Just,
get to use the like notaries?
So so everything had to be notarized, translated. Translated and notarized.
And if you get to the notary, then you discover how bureaucratic this country is. Once I heard, I'm not sure, I'm sorry, the Portuguese, okay? We've been colonized by the Portuguese and stuff. Once I learned that this was a behavior from the Portuguese that we inherited.
Really? Probably.
I don't know, okay? Because they probably had to destroy this to get into the European Union. Because the Germany, England, they don't work like that, France.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, my friend, this is a country that you have to prove that you are who you are. Like, hey,
Yeah.
And you have to sign, and they have to stamp it and sign. He is really who he says.
Not only do you have to prove who you are, but you have to have somebody else verify that you are who you are.
Yeah, I grew up with this guy. He is who he are. Come on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that was very frustrating as well. And the language, right? Like if you didn't speak the language, especially in the first couple of months when I was trying to set up my life, very difficult to get any of this done. Very difficult.
How many people speak English down here, right?
Sorry?
Not many people speak
Not many people.
down here.
Exactly. And that's the other thing as well. So that's just day to day. Closing off day to day was very difficult in the beginning for me. So I struggled with that. Also then I lived in Ipanema. When I arrived, the person that was assigned to help get us apartments and things like that, basically said you can only live in Ipanema, Leblanc, maybe some parts of Copacabana. That's it, right? We don't advise you to live anywhere else. It's not safe, especially for, a female, single female. Leblon, Ipanema, maybe Copacabana. And they would only provide me options for those areas. So that was the limit of my experience, right? And it wasn't until,
It scares you, of course, because you say if they have those restrictions, something happens there that I don't see, right? So
and
how
it
do you
limits
live in a
your
place
view.
like that?
And it limits your view of like really the city, right?
Exactly.
So outside of that, it's a completely different Rio de Janeiro, right? Like there's so much diversity and so
Allow
many
me to
different.
say, allow me to say
A year and a
something.
half. I lived there for a year and a half.
Allow me to say something. Outside of Rio, it's also a different Brazil.
It is. That is very
It's
true
a
as well.
country of contrasts. So I was gonna tell you, and look, I love the Cariocas. I love Rio de Janeiro. I don't mean to run them down or anything like that. But I'm from São Paulo, and there are things here that work in 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have some institutions that you go for a document, for example. You go online and you settle your appointment, and then you go there in 5 minutes. You're served. You have taken all the documentation that you need. I knew a guy who lived in Los Angeles. He stayed like 2.5 hours in the driving department to be able to get
The DMV. Yeah.
in Brazil. I joked because the day he told me that I was in one of these places in Brazil, and in 20 minutes I was out.
Wow.
So yeah, it really is a country of contrasts.
It is.
Unbelievable.
It's a huge country. It's a huge country.
Right?
And at the end of my stay, so I lived in Brazil for a year and a half. So at the end, after the Olympics, I did make kind of like a big tour of the country,
Where did you go?
and also during the Olympics. So I went to all of the football cities. So
You
Belo
came to São Paulo.
Horizonte, Manaus. I came to Sao Paulo.
First
I went to
time
Sao Paulo
in life?
lots. Sorry?
First time in life, São Paulo.
Yeah, first time in
What
life.
was your impression when you came?
Completely different. Completely different. Yeah, everything that you're saying was a completely different. Like I personally prefer Sao Paulo. I would live in Sao Paulo.
Mm-hmm.
Probably would not live in Rio again.
Okay.
I really liked it, and every top to bottom, right? So from Manaus, I was in Tabatinga. I was in the Amazons in Tabatinga.
Very nice.
All the way down
I have
to
never visited.
yeah, even all the way down to Blumenau, Florianópolis, Curitiba, Porto Alegre.
You saw the
right?
German community down there then.
Saw the German. We did Oktoberfest in
Did you go
Blumenau.
to Rio Grande do Sul, the last state before Uruguay?
Is that where Porto Alegre is?
Yes, very good.
Yeah.
Porto
Yeah.
Alegre
So I went to Porto Alegre.
Did you go to
Yeah.
Gramado?
No.
Okay, but have you heard of the fame of
Yeah.
the city? Yeah.
Yeah.
Those who don't know, Gramado is a small Swiss city or a Swiss-like city.
Yeah. And Blumenau.
It's amazing.
Blumenau is a small German city, right? And so they were saying that they speak a dialect there that isn't even spoken in Germany anymore.
Wow.
But it was the dialect that the German colony established there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Really, really cool. So, but that was a year late, a year and a half after
Sure.
that I was able to see all that and see how different and how, Brazil is incredible. It's huge. It's got so much diversity, but you don't see that living in Ipanema, Leblon, right? You don't see that. And so that was also something that was a little bit, it took me a while to get used to. Mm-hmm. Canada we have our issues. Of course we have our issues, but generally speaking, it's a very multicultural society. Yep. So I was used to, at any level of society, top to bottom, everything in the middle, you see every color, every race, right? And it was a really big shock to me to see the very clear divide in the classes and in the color of your skin. Wow. in Leblon and Ipanema, and I wasn't used to that. So that it kind of I'm still not really comfortable with it. Right?
Allow me to talk to you about this for a minute. As you guys, again, if you guys have been following the channel, you might know by now that I have interviewed a couple of other foreigners about Brazil. And you guys might remember Kevin, the first guy who gave me an interview. And we ended up talking about racism and stuff like that. because he's an African American living in New York City, as well as Neil is another great person I got to know through the post, because Neil was the guy who responded to the post. But you know, when I ask about Brazil, did you feel racism evident as it is in the United States? Because it is. And then Kevin said, well, let me tell you, brother, classism is bigger.
Classism, yeah.
And then I was like, really? Tell me about it, because I really wanted to hear from him. He said, if you have money, you are a person. If you don't, you're nothing. And I said, oh my God, he just described my childhood. Everything I experienced in São Paulo.
Yeah.
And I think in Rio is worse, because São Paulo, you know, the place is like this. The rich areas are the rich areas. The poor areas are in the outskirts of the city.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't get to relate to one another. They don't get along because they don't, you know, they don't live the same story. They don't use the same space together. And in Rio, no, Rio is so small.
All together. But that's where I mean, where the classism and the colorism comes into play, right? So in LeBlanc, and obviously I'm making generalizations, right? Obviously there's always exceptions to the rule.
You are describing what you have witnessed.
Yeah, exactly. But generally speaking, in LeBlanc and Ipanema, all of the people that have money are white or whiter, and the ones that are serving you, parking your cars, are darker, right? And it's very apparent, very, very apparent. And the only kind of like exceptions to that are the tourists. But then you have money, you're a tourist. So obviously the treatment is great. And then the other interesting thing that I experienced was the fact that like my own self-identity and my own self-image and my perception. So in Canada, like I was telling you, I was Latina first, then Canadian. You know, in Canada, I was seen as like the ethnic minority, right? And I didn't have privilege. I didn't have, you know, I was always aware that I was a different one from the mainstream Canadian culture.
But do they make it clear for you?
No, not at all.
I have heard stories like Canadians don't even ask where you're from, not to separate you from them, which is, I thought, I said, wow, if that's true, it's amazing.
Generally speaking, it's really great because we're used to having people from all over. So it's more of and even just in our policies, like in Canada, when you become a citizen, you don't have to renounce your citizenship to your other country. You have dual citizenship. So because Canada is very much like, we want a melting pot, right? Yeah, it's amazing. Whereas the US, if you want to become an American citizen, you have to absolutely renounce your other citizenship, right? So even in our policies, we're very, very different. But I mean, that's what I mean. I always was, you know, the Latina. I was Spanish, Hispanic, Latina. In Rio, you know, I was foreign. I was white, like I'm pretty, you know, light skinned. And so the treatment that I got was different. And the treatment that I received was better. And it was the first time, I kid you not, the first time in my life that I became aware of the privilege that I had as a lighter skinned foreign woman somewhere, you know? So that was very difficult for me to process because my whole life I'd spent, you know, on the other side, fighting for that privilege and fighting for the voices of the minorities to be heard. And then here in Rio, I was of the privileged side, especially working for the Olympics, right? And so just internally, that caused a lot of conflict for me, a lot of conflict. And also, you know, the culture. And again, this is probably something that's maybe just Cariocas or maybe in Rio, but it's a very insular culture. And what I mean by that is there's so much nationalist pride, which is great because, you know, that's amazing, but very little influence of everything else, right? So it's Brazilian music, Brazilian food, Brazilian everything. There's no real influence of anything else. In Sao Paulo, there's a lot more of that, but in Rio, not so much. So for example, I would ask, you know, where can I go listen to hip hop? Like where's a hip hop club, right? And I had someone to my face, and you may, I don't know, maybe you want to edit this later, but to my face, and they said, no, Keila, we don't listen to hip hop. That's Black people, poor people music. Like, to my face. I was completely blown away.
I would be too.
You know, I just didn't know how to respond to that. So I ended up, you know, just because of who I am, ended up trying to reach out to different people. And I ended up going to Viaducto de Madureira, which is, you know, really sketchy part of town. There was a shootout, like there's a whole thing.
My goodness. Wow, this conversation has been so interesting. First of all, I'm looking at the clock because I really need to control, not to hold you for 2 years, 2 years or 2 hours. Oh my goodness. Because you have so much to tell, which is amazing. But let me ask you a few things. If it gets too long, I will
Sure.
talk this later. You are describing a Brazil that I know little. That's incredible, don't you think? I know these things you're saying exist, of course. I have seen some of them. But you said something that might screw my neck, one of my later on questions, because I was gonna ask you, I was gonna tell you about some Brazilians that have low self-esteem when it comes to the country. But what you said, whoa, stop it. It really broke everything. You said the Brazilians are unbelievably nationalists. This is what you said in your view.
Yeah.
Why do you say that again? Patriot.
So patriotic. And again, this may be just a real thing. This may be just a Carioca thing. But, you know, I remember asking them about, so we're trying to look for a bar to go one day or a club or whatnot. And I was asking, you know, is there anywhere where we can go listen to some flamenco or some, you know, some hip hop? That's where that comment came from. And they're like, no, they're like, Keila, like Brazilian popular music, that's all you're gonna find. And I'm like, but that's so, like, why? Like, that's great, but why? It's like, because it's the best. Like that, we don't need anything else. It's the best.
Wow.
Right?
Sounded really American.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh
and
God.
you know, you have to keep in mind, Mark, you have to keep in mind the context. Like, context is so important when you're discussing anything. The context of me is I arrived to this organizing committee, which was primarily, you know, people who had privilege or connections and whatnot. So it was already a very different group of people, right? It was outside of that, it was difficult for me to make friends that were local, right? Because how would I, right? Like, how would I? So I either was surrounded by expats, so people from all over the world who were there like me, or with this group of people from the organizing committee, right? So I think that my experience was very much skewed in that way. And it wasn't until towards the end of my trip that I was able to really get to know more local people, because I had the time, right? Like, the event was finished. But also because I spoke the language a lot better, I had the time, and I knew my way around now, right? So I knew where to go, where not to go.
But you know, sorry, there is a chopper flying over. If you can hear it.
No, not really.
You know, I believe reality is perceived by different
100%.
factors. Right?
100%.
Depending on the perspective where you are, depending on the background you've got. So what is right, what is wrong? Basically, you can't tell that. You can't tell. But I said, and I will repeat myself, your experience is very enlightening to the channel, because you were bringing sides that are very important that people who are willing to, or who wants to live in the country need to know. To know that, because they can either become part of the solution.
Exactly.
Get out.
Exactly. Like, for example, now if I were to go back, I would probably live in Botafogo, you know, or Tujica, or Santa Teresa.
A place that was not allowed for you to choose.
Exactly. Exactly.
So let me ask you a question about that exactly. Oh my God. We were talking about, okay, yes. I have to tell you that if you pick up the historical background, I think these things become very clear. Are you aware that Rio used to be the capital of the country
Yeah.
when
And
the
then-
Portuguese royal family came?
Mhm.
You're aware of that, right?
Yes.
So we had a major royal Portuguese family, Europeans, white people who came to the country, right? Ruled the whole thing for years before they returned to Portugal. In
Mhm.
São Paulo, on the other hand, in the beginning of the last century, you had masses of immigration. The
Mhm.
Japanese,
Italians,
the Italians, what else? Who am I forgetting?
Polish. I think there's Polish.
Polish. Even there are Americans here. There is a city called Americana in the
Oh, really?
countryside. Yeah, they were projected by the Americans. The streets are this wide compared to
Wow.
the ones in Brazil that are normally this. So I think you said, well, I couldn't find a place to see flamenco. In São Paulo, I can name you 10 places you could go to watch a flamenco presentation.
Yeah.
I have seen
And-
it myself, you know.
And that's what I mean. Again, right? The perspective that you have is important because my perspective was predominantly Rio de Janeiro,
Exactly.
right? And also limited time and the context that I was there. And the other thing as well, that's really important to this is the country context. You know, if you remember, 2016 was an incredibly political year for Brazil. There was so many protests.
And
there was a lot of violence.
Yeah.
There was a lot of violence.
Mhm.
You know, Dilma was impeached.
Yes.
You know, there was so much going on in the country that also made it quite difficult to explore, right? I love to travel, and you know, I've been fortunate enough that I've been able to travel a lot, and I love to just go off on my own and explore. And in Brazil, I didn't feel that I could do that, right? Because I never knew if the next corner I was going to be in an area where there's going to be a shootout, right? Or I wasn't familiar with it was dangerous. There was violence, right? And so that also played into the part where I never really felt at ease in Rio, the time that I was there. I never felt like at peace.
Have you been able to return to the country ever since?
Yeah, so, oh man. And so that was, you know, it was a difficult year and a half. Also just personally, I had left a very long-term relationship in Canada to be in Brazil.
Okay.
All of the things that I talked about today, you know, all of that together, the stress of the event, the stress of the work. I think I left Brazil with a very negative association.
Okay.
Even though my last month I spent traveling around Salvador de Bahia, oh my God, you know, like amazing, beautiful places, Florianópolis, gorgeous, you know. I still associated my time in Brazil with a very difficult time in my life. And for many years, I felt that way.
It's pretty understanding, of course.
And you can ask Kevin. We'd have discussions where I'm like, no, I'm never going. I don't need to go back. I've seen it all. There's no reason for me to go back.
Okay.
But then time heals.
Yes.
Perspective. You know, I was able to work through some of the things that I started to work through while I lived there.
Okay.
I had a friend, and also it really also helped that since that event, I've always been surrounded with Brazilians. So my next project was in Turkmenistan, which is another interview and another story for another time.
Sure.
And there was a very large Brazilian group, La
I'm
Mafia Brasileira.
I'm gonna open a channel called Turkmenistan Unsubtitled.
Yeah.
Our channel to get to know all you ever want to know about Turkmenistan.
Oh man, it is a place, let me tell you. And so I was surrounded by Brazilians there, right? And so continued with that sort of culture and friendship and whatnot. Then in Lima, my immediate team is all Brazilian. So, you know, I left Brazil, but I didn't leave Brazil, right? And that has really helped in, I think, the healing process.
We are there to haunt you.
You're always there. Two of my best friends, one of them got married, so I went back for the wedding.
Where?
but it was in Porto Alegre, so it wasn't Rio.
Okay.
And then another one of my very good friends had an event in Rio, and it was 2018 was the first time that I went back to Rio, and I was very nervous, and I was very like, oh, I'm only going because I love you, Joseph. Like that's the only reason I'm going. And I flew in on a Friday night, and I flew out on a Sunday afternoon. Like that's it.
Okay.
But it was the first time that I arrived back, and it was very mixed feelings. I was with people that I loved and loved me, and we went to very specific places. So it was very positive, and I'm like, okay, I can do this. And then I would say that the last sort of healing moment was just this past New Year's. Another very good friend of mine was getting married, and she's like, we want to go to Rio de Janeiro and celebrate New Year's there. Why don't you come with us? And I debated. I'm like, should I not? And I thought, you know what? I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go.
Her first phrase was, "Oh man."
Well, I resisted. I'm like, I've done New Year's in Rio de Janeiro. Like I've done it. Why? No, I'm not interested. But she insisted and insisted and insisted. And so last minute, I was visiting my parents in Canada for the holidays, and I was out in a Christmas party, and I got drunk, and I booked a ticket. And so I flew to Rio, and I spent 10 days. And I have to tell you, Mark, that it really was like the turning point. It was definitely, I think that was the trip that made me realize how much Brazil is still part of me, and the beautiful friendships that I've been able to maintain and have because of that. And that whole trip was very healing. So I went to my old neighborhood. You know, I went to all of like the old little places where I used to go.
Oh, you have to give us the name of the booze for us to thank the country. Factory.
Yeah.
So you were responsible for changing.
Yeah, for booking that flight. No, I have a tendency to book flights when I'm drunk. So yeah, I've done a couple trips like that where I wake up the next day and there's a confirmation email for like Colombia or something, like, oh, I guess I'm going to Colombia next week.
Thank God you have resources for that. Otherwise, you go broke really easily.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at now. And this just happened. Like this just happened this past, New Year. This past January.
So now you think you would come back easily if you had?
I would come back easily.
So tell me about the upsides. The things you have seen here that were different and really, really touched you. If we can.
Yeah, the Brazilian people are very resilient people. They are people that you can throw them into any situation, and they will find a way, and they will make a way to not only come out of it positively, but come out of it positively partying and dancing and joking and happy, right? That I admire a lot. I admire that a lot. I admire the sense of community that they have, that you guys have, especially as they leave Brazil. Like I tell you, like every single project that I've worked with after that, there's always been a group of Brazilians. And no matter what part of the world they're in, they always come together. And I think that's really admirable as well. That support, that social network that they're able to provide for each other, I think is really, really important as well.
But about that, do you feel like Brazilians make communities that are closed in themselves, like some other nations do? Like, because you know what I mean? Like, the Japanese, so it's just the Japanese. Or Brazilians do help their brothers and sisters, but they also get together with others. What is the aspect that you see on that?
You know what? That's a good question. I'm not too sure. That's actually a really good question. I would say that they.
For example, there was a program from the Canadian government. Because I speak the language, I tend to read about anything, you know. So there was a program about the Canadian government to offer benefits for the Brazilians, and there were two other nations, I don't remember. But they say that the Brazilians were included because of their power to get to interact with other people from other communities So if you brought immigrants in, they wouldn't become Brazilians speaking Portuguese all the time. And
Right. Oh, I see. Like the integration. No, yes. They integrate absolutely. Absolutely. Like, you know, the Brazilians that I had met in Vancouver and in Toronto were very integrated, and we met in a
learn the
very
language, right?
absolutely, absolutely. But what I'm referring to is more that kind of solidarity with
Right.
other Brazilians. Like, I don't know you, but if you need something, because I will help you. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's very important. But in terms of integration, no, absolutely. They're you know, as generally speaking, they're quite integrated into whatever, you know, society that they find themselves.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. So you live in Panama, just so people know. Because guys, I have put here the Canadian flag and the city where she grew up in, which is Vancouver, under her picture. But she lives in, because I couldn't put Panama, because if I took too long to
Yeah.
upload the interview, probably I would have to change again, put Lima, Peru, or because this
Yeah.
really travels. She's like, do you know Tintin?
Tintin.
Yeah, she's like Tintin. Do you have a Lulu, the dog, or no?
No, I don't know. But we're called the Games Gypsies. That's what the name that we've given, like the group of people that do this, Games Gypsies.
Wow, she's so busy and travels a lot, you know?
I love it. I love it.
Like James Bond, always traveling. Amazing. But then I put the Canadian flag in Vancouver so that you guys know where she grew up and why her English is so good, because she's a Canadian, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't put the Panamanian flag. Is that correct?
Panamanian, yeah.
Panamanian. Okay, Keila, to finish, and look, I'm telling you this with my broken heart, because I really wanted to talk to you like 2 hours more. But we have 1.5 hours already speaking.
Yeah, I know.
For me to edit everything is going to be complicated. But let me ask you, do you have a message for the Brazilians when it comes to, I don't know, telling whatever you want to say about Brazil? Do you have a message for the Brazilians who are watching, and also for the foreigners who are watching and want to visit Brazil?
Yeah. For the Brazilians who are watching, like I said, I have so many close friends that are Brazilian now, and they're going through a hard time. You know, your country's going through a hard time. And I just want to give you guys a message of hope. You are a resilient people. You are a resilient people that will make it through this dark time. Don't give up. Change is going to come, but change has to start with you guys. Yeah. So if you want the change to happen, you have to make it happen.
Micro first, right? It's inside, and
then make it happen at policy level, at government level, make it happen.
Not the other way around, because people think
exactly.
by changing the government we're going to have a change. No, that's by ourselves.
Exactly.
What about the foreigners who really
for the foreigners? For the foreigners, I would encourage you to explore outside of what the traditional experience is. There is so much more to Brazil than just Copacabana Beach. So much more. There are so many more interesting neighborhoods, cities, history, foods. So be adventurous, make friends with maybe someone local, and really try to get off that beaten path. It's highly, highly recommended.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, before I wrap up, I just want to ask you if you know Zé Carioca.
Zé Carioca?
Have you ever heard of Zé Carioca?
No.
The Disney character created by Walt Disney when he came
Mentira.
Yeah.
Oh, is he like he's a bird?
Parrot. He's a parrot.
The parrot. Okay, yes.
Oh, finally.
Yes.
Zé Carioca.
And he wears a hat.
He wears a hat, and when he was sketched, of course, it was 1942, something like that. Of course, the outfit was different. They had
Yeah.
bow ties and stuff.
Yeah.
But they have modernized the character. But I'm asking you this because the way you describe the Brazilians, I couldn't help but think of Zé Carioca.
Really?
The way he talked to Mickey and Minnie, there was an episode where Mickey was jealous because of the way he talked, and he's always so laid back and cool, and Donald is always angry, and
Uh-huh.
Carioca is, no, relax, everything's
Just
gonna be
chill.
just chill, exactly. I have a video about this character. Just go to my channel and watch.
Okay.
It's like a 15-minute story about Zé Carioca. I think I've done a good job because I put the historical background, why he was created. And unfortunately, many people don't know this in North America, right? It was created by Walt Disney, but it's not used in the United States very much. If I'm not
No,
mistaken.
I do remember it, but I'm, again, not super familiar, but I do remember it.
But the way you said, I completely pictured him because it's exactly what he is, a typical Brazilian. You're gonna watch and you tell me later. Well,
Okay.
also, I have to say, I told the other guys this, and I want to tell you as well. Look, you guys are getting, you're not getting paid to give me this interview. So you're doing this because you were willing to talk about the country.
Yeah. I think it's good to have dialogue. Good to have dialogue and conversation.
Thank you so much for this opportunity you have given me. From
Of
the
course.
bottom of my heart, thank you for taking your time on a Sunday afternoon. Look at the sun. It's like 3 or 4 o'clock right now, so it's pretty sunny. And you are here talking to me 2 hours earlier in Panama, right? Thank you very much for this.
No worries.
I'm gonna give you as a present for this interview a book like this. This is the story of a very important moment in the Brazilian history, where the Portuguese family was forced to transfer the power to Brazil. I don't know if you have heard about this episode
Yeah.
in history. That's when Rio and the glamour started because the royal family was suddenly
Lived here.
exactly. And this guy, he doesn't pay me for this. It's just because I love the book and I wanna give you as a present. Laurentino Gomes, he talks about the book in a very very easy way. It's not the vocabulary for historians, that boring thing that will make you nod off while you're reading. So just to say thank you, you're gonna receive one of these.
Thanks.
I just wanna see how we're going to do this. Maybe one day when you come, or I can send
Maybe.
you
Yeah, I was
something
just
like
gonna
that,
say.
or I
Right
can,
now, our borders are still closed, so I can't get anything even here. So
yeah, who knows?
we'll make it happen.
But if it takes too long, I'm going to send it to you through the mail. Thank you
Okay.
very much for this opportunity. Stay with me after I say bye-bye, because I want to tell you something off the records, okay?
Sure.
So
Sounds
guys,
good.
this has been another amazing interview. My goodness, I could extend like 30 minutes more, but I really have to stop it. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget the thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click on the bell button to receive notifications. This is Mark Sant, and this is Brazil and Subtitled. See you next time. Bye-bye.